let's talk about something that almost nobody connects properly. Inflammation, fat loss, and muscle growth are not separate systems. They are the same system. And when you understand that, everything changes because there is one simple powder that targets all three at the same time, not by stimulating you, not by suppressing appetite aggressively, but by changing the environment inside your body so it can actually build muscle and burn fat efficiently. Here's the hard truth. If inflammation is high, fat loss stalls, muscle growth slows, recovery suffers, hormones get disrupted, and no amount of protein, training intensity, or supplements will fully fix that. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the biggest silent blockers of body recomposition, and this is where longevity science and performance science finally meet. Researchers like Dr. David Sinclair have shown that inflammation accelerates aging at the cellular level. But what most people don't realize is that the same inflammatory pathways that age your cells also prevent your muscles from growing and keep fat cells metabolically active. Inflammation literally tells your body to store energy, not build tissue. So if you want to shrink fat and build serious muscle, the first step is not more calories or more workouts. It's lowering inflammation in a smart, targeted way. Now, the powder we're talking about today isn't new, it's not flashy, and it doesn't work like a pre-workout or a fat burner. It works at the root. It improves insulin sensitivity. It reduces inflammatory signaling. It enhances nutrient partitioning, meaning calories go toward muscle instead of fat. And it supports mitochondrial efficiency, which is something Dr. Sinclair talks about constantly when it comes to metabolic health and longevity. Here's why this matters. When inflammation drops, insulin works better. When insulin works better, nutrients get shuttled into muscle cells instead of fat cells. Muscle protein synthesis increases, recovery improves, and fat cells become more willing to release stored energy. This is not theory, this is physiology. And the reason this powder is so powerful is because it doesn't force anything. It doesn't spike cortisol. It doesn't overstimulate the nervous system. Instead, it creates a metabolic environment where your body can finally do what it's designed to do. Think about this for a second. You train hard, you eat protein, you try to sleep well, but if inflammation is elevated from stress, poor sleep, ultra-processed foods, or even excessive training, your body stays in a defensive mode. In that state, muscle growth is expensive and fat loss is risky, so your body avoids both. Lower the inflammation, and suddenly muscle becomes easier to build and fat becomes easier to burn. This is why elite athletes and longevity researchers are starting to overlap in their thinking. Longevity isn't just about living longer, it's about maintaining lean mass, metabolic flexibility, and low inflammation as you age. And that starts with controlling the inflammatory response without shutting it down completely. Now, here's something very important. Inflammation itself is not bad. Acute inflammation is how muscles grow. It's how adaptation happens. The problem is chronic inflammation. That's the kind that lingers in the background, disrupting insulin signaling, impairing recovery, and keeping fat cells inflamed and stubborn. The powder we're talking about doesn't eliminate inflammation, it normalizes it. People who use this consistently notice a few things pretty quickly. Less joint stiffness, better pumps in the gym, more stable energy throughout the day, improved recovery between workouts, and over time, a noticeable shift in body composition, tighter waist, fuller muscles, better strength retention even during fat loss phases. And the most interesting part, this powder doesn't work by increasing calories or suppressing appetite. It works by improving efficiency. Your body starts using what you give it better. Protein gets used for muscle. Carbohydrates refill glycogen instead of being stored as fat. Fat becomes fuel again. The powder we're talking about is glycine. And I know that probably wasn't what you expected. Glycine doesn't get hyped. It doesn't promise insane pumps or instant fat loss. But from a biochemical standpoint, glycine is one of the most powerful metabolic regulators you can add to your routine if your goal is to reduce inflammation, improve body composition, and support muscle growth long term. Let's start with what glycine actually is. Glycine is a non-essential amino acid, which means your body can make it. But here's the catch. It almost never makes enough, especially if you train hard, eat a modern diet, or are under chronic stress. Glycine is required for collagen synthesis, glutathione production, detoxification, neurotransmitter balance, and mitochondrial efficiency. That's a massive list. And when glycine is low, inflammation goes up almost automatically. One of glycine's most powerful roles is its effect on systemic inflammation. Glycine binds to glycine receptors on immune cells and dampens excessive inflammatory signaling. This doesn't shut the immune system down, it simply prevents it from overreacting. This is critical for athletes and lifters because chronic inflammation interferes with insulin signaling and muscle recovery. Lower inflammation means better nutrient uptake into muscle cells and less spillover into fat storage. From a fat loss perspective, glycine improves insulin sensitivity. When insulin sensitivity improves, your body becomes better at partitioning nutrients. Carbohydrates refill muscle glycogen instead of feeding fat cells. Protein gets used for muscle repair instead of being oxidized. And fat cells become less inflamed, which makes them more willing to release stored energy. This is exactly the environment you want for recomposition. Now let's connect this to muscle growth. Muscle protein synthesis doesn't just depend on protein intake. It depends on how well your body can actually use that protein. Glycine supports the synthesis of creatine, which is directly involved in ATP production during high-intensity training. More efficient ATP regeneration means better training performance, more mechanical tension, and better stimulus for muscle growth. Glycine also plays a major role in producing glutathione, the body's master antioxidant. High training volumes, poor sleep, and caloric deficits all increase oxidative stress. Oxidative stress damages muscle tissue and slows recovery. By boosting glutathione levels, glycine helps muscles recover faster and reduces the breakdown side of the muscle protein balance equation. Less breakdown plus normal synthesis equals net growth, even in a fat loss phase. This is where Dr. David Sinclair's work becomes relevant. Sinclair often talks about mitochondrial health as a core pillar of longevity and metabolic efficiency. Glycine supports mitochondrial function by improving redox balance and reducing mitochondrial stress. Healthier mitochondria burn fuel more efficiently and produce less inflammatory byproduct. That's a win for fat loss, energy, and muscle endurance. Another overlooked benefit of glycine is its effect on the nervous system. Glycine acts as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. This helps lower baseline stress levels and improves sleep quality. And better sleep directly improves testosterone, growth hormone, insulin sensitivity, and recovery. You don't build muscle in the gym, you build it while you sleep. Glycine helps make that sleep deeper and more restorative. People often notice that when they add glycine consistently, soreness decreases, joints feel better, and training feels smoother. That's not placebo. That's inflammation dropping and tissue repair improving. And unlike stimulants or aggressive fat burners, glycine doesn't tax the adrenal system or disrupt hormones. What makes glycine especially interesting is that it works whether you're cutting, maintaining, or bulking. During fat loss, it protects muscle and improves fat mobilization. During muscle gain, it improves recovery and nutrient utilization. And during maintenance, it keeps inflammation low so progress doesn't stall. To understand how glycine actually helps shrink fat, you need to understand something most fat loss plans completely ignore. Fat tissue itself can become inflamed. And when fat cells are inflamed, they become metabolically dysfunctional. They stop responding properly to hormones. They resist releasing stored energy. And they actively signal the body to hold on to fat as a protective mechanism. This is one of the reasons people hit fat loss plateaus even when calories are controlled and training is consistent. The issue isn't effort, it's the inflammatory state of the fat tissue. Chronic low-grade inflammation inside fat cells disrupts insulin signaling, increases cortisol sensitivity, and makes lipolysis harder. Glycine directly addresses this problem. Glycine reduces inflammatory cytokine production in adipose tissue. That matters because inflamed fat cells leak inflammatory signals into the bloodstream, which then interfere with muscle recovery and overall metabolism. When glycine lowers this inflammatory signaling, fat tissue becomes more metabolically flexible. In simple terms, fat cells stop panicking and start cooperating. One of the key ways glycine does this is by improving insulin sensitivity at the fat cell level. When insulin sensitivity improves, insulin can do its job efficiently and then leave. That's important because prolonged insulin exposure is what keeps fat locked in storage. Glycine helps shorten insulin's presence by improving how quickly glucose is cleared. This creates longer windows where fat can be mobilized and burned. There's also a mitochondrial angle here. Inflamed fat cells tend to have dysfunctional mitochondria. Dysfunctional mitochondria burn less fat and produce more oxidative stress. Glycine supports mitochondrial repair and efficiency, which shifts fat cells from a storage dominant state to a fuel using state. This is critical for long-term fat loss. Another important piece is glycine's effect on gluconeogenesis and liver metabolism. Glycine helps the liver process glucose more efficiently, reducing the need for constant insulin release. Lower baseline insulin levels mean your body spends more time in a fat burning state. This is why glycine pairs extremely well with fasting, low carb phases, or time-restricted eating approaches that Dr. David Sinclair often discusses in the context of metabolic health. But glycine doesn't just help you burn fat, it helps you keep it off. Chronic inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of fat regain after dieting. When inflammation stays high, the body perceives weight loss as a threat and aggressively tries to restore fat mass. By keeping inflammation low, glycine reduces the rebound effect and helps stabilize your new body composition. Now let's talk about muscle preservation during fat loss, because this is where glycine really separates itself from typical fat loss supplements. When calories drop, muscle breakdown often increases. Cortisol goes up, recovery goes down. Glycine counteracts this by improving nitrogen balance and reducing muscle protein breakdown. This means you can lose fat without sacrificing lean mass. Glycine also improves blood flow and nutrient delivery by supporting nitric oxide balance indirectly. Better blood flow means muscles get more amino acids, more oxygen, and more glucose when they need it, especially around training. That translates to better pumps, better performance, and stronger muscle building signals even in a caloric deficit. From a practical standpoint, people who add glycine during fat loss phases often report that fat loss feels easier. Hunger is more manageable, energy is more stable, training performance holds up better, and visually, muscle fullness stays intact while fat gradually decreases. That's the goal of intelligent recomposition. This is why glycine isn't a shortcut, it's a foundation. It doesn't override biology, it fixes the bottlenecks that were preventing progress in the first place. When people think about building serious muscle, they usually focus on protein intake, training volume, and progressive overload. And while those things matter, they only work as well as your recovery systems allow. Muscle growth is not just about stimulus. It's about how efficiently your body repairs tissue, rebuilds fibers, and adapts to stress. This is where glycine becomes a game changer, especially for long-term muscle growth and strength retention. One of glycine's most important roles in muscle building is its involvement in collagen synthesis. Muscle isn't just muscle fibers. It's connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, and fascia. Collagen makes up a massive portion of these structures, and glycine is a primary building block of collagen. Without adequate glycine, connective tissue recovery lags behind muscle growth. This increases injury risk and limits how hard and how often you can train. When connective tissue gets stronger, muscles can contract more forcefully and efficiently. That means better force transfer, improved strength output, and more productive training sessions. Over time, this leads to greater hypertrophy potential. This is one reason people who supplement glycine often notice fewer aches, healthier joints, and more consistent progress in the gym. Glycine also supports muscle protein balance by reducing muscle protein breakdown. During intense training or calorie deficits, muscle breakdown often outpaces synthesis. Glycine helps shift that balance by lowering inflammation and oxidative stress, both of which are major drivers of catabolism. Less breakdown means the protein you eat actually goes toward building muscle instead of repairing excessive damage. Another overlooked benefit is glycine's role in creatine synthesis. Creatine is one of the most well-researched performance supplements available, but it requires glycine as a precursor. Even if you supplement creatine, endogenous creatine synthesis still matters for cellular energy buffering. More efficient creatine availability improves ATP regeneration during high-intensity training, which supports strength, power, and training volume, all critical for muscle growth. From a hormonal standpoint, glycine indirectly supports an anabolic environment by improving sleep quality. Deep sleep is when growth hormone pulses occur. Growth hormone doesn't directly build muscle, but it enhances recovery, fat utilization, and tissue repair. Glycine's calming effect on the nervous system improves sleep depth and reduces nighttime cortisol. Lower cortisol means less muscle breakdown and better nutrient utilization. This becomes especially important as you age. Dr. David Sinclair often emphasizes that aging is associated with increased inflammation and reduced cellular repair capacity. Glycine helps counteract both. For older lifters or anyone trying to maintain muscle while reducing inflammation, glycine supports the cellular environment needed to preserve lean mass and training capacity. There's also an endurance component here. Healthier mitochondria mean better energy production inside muscle cells. Glycine supports mitochondrial redox balance, which improves fatigue resistance. This allows you to maintain output across sets and sessions, increasing the total stimulus muscles receive over time. Another key point is recovery speed. Faster recovery doesn't mean skipping adaptation. It means your body is ready to train again sooner without accumulating excessive stress. Glycine improves recovery between sessions by enhancing tissue repair and reducing systemic inflammation. This allows for more consistent training, which is one of the biggest predictors of long-term muscle growth. Importantly, glycine does all of this without overstimulating the nervous system. There's no crash, no dependency, no interference with appetite or hormones. It quietly supports the systems that matter most. This is why glycine works for both athletes and longevity-focused individuals. Strong muscles are not just about aesthetics, they are one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. Maintaining muscle mass protects metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and overall resilience. Now let's put all of this together into something practical, sustainable, and effective, because understanding the science is important, but what really matters is how you use glycine in a way that supports fat loss, muscle growth, and low inflammation over the long term without overcomplicating your routine. The first thing to understand is timing. Glycine works best when it supports recovery, insulin sensitivity, and nervous system downregulation. That's why the most effective time to take it is in the evening, either with your last meal or about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. This timing allows glycine to reduce nighttime inflammation, improve sleep quality, and enhance tissue repair while your body is already in a recovery state. From a dosage perspective, most people respond well in the range of 3 to 5 grams per day. This is enough to support glutathione production, reduce inflammatory signaling, and improve sleep without causing digestive discomfort. Some athletes go slightly higher, especially during intense training blocks or fat loss phases, but consistency matters more than pushing the dose. One of the biggest advantages of glycine is that it stacks extremely well with other foundational supplements. It pairs well with magnesium for sleep, creatine for strength and power, and protein for muscle repair. It also works synergistically with fasting or time-restricted eating by improving insulin sensitivity and reducing metabolic stress, concepts that align closely with the metabolic health principles discussed by Dr. David Sinclair. What's important to remember is that glycine is not a stimulant and not a fat burner in the traditional sense. You won't feel it the way you feel caffeine or pre-workouts. Instead, you'll notice indirect improvements, better recovery, more stable energy, improved body composition, and less inflammation over time. This is exactly how foundational supplements are supposed to work. Consistency is where the magic happens. Glycine builds its benefits gradually by restoring balance to systems that have been chronically stressed: the immune system, the nervous system, and the metabolic system. Over weeks, this translates into better training sessions, improved fat loss efficiency, and stronger, healthier muscle tissue. This is also why glycine is so powerful for long-term results. Most supplements work by pushing the body harder. Glycine works by making the body more efficient. and efficiency is what allows progress to continue without burnout, injury, or hormonal disruption. If there's one takeaway from this entire discussion, it's this: inflammation is the bottleneck. When you remove that bottleneck, fat loss becomes smoother, muscle growth becomes more sustainable, and recovery becomes faster. Glycine doesn't replace training, nutrition, or discipline. It amplifies them by fixing what was holding them back. This is exactly the kind of compound that fits at the intersection of performance and longevity: build muscle, reduce fat, protect joints, support sleep, and lower inflammation, all while supporting mitochondrial health and metabolic flexibility. When you think long term, not just weeks, but years, that's the kind of strategy that actually works. Now let's bring everything together and turn this into a real world strategy you can actually stick to. Because the real power of glycine isn't in hype or short term effects. It's in how it quietly fixes the internal environment that determines whether your body burns fat, builds muscle, or stays inflamed and stuck. The first thing to understand is timing. Glycine works best when your body is shifting into recovery mode. That's why taking it in the evening is so effective. About 30 to 60 minutes before bed, glycine helps calm the nervous system, lower nighttime cortisol, and reduce low-grade inflammation. This creates the ideal conditions for muscle repair, fat metabolism, and hormonal balance while you sleep. From a dosing standpoint, most people do best with 3 to 5 grams per day. This is enough to support glutathione production, collagen synthesis, insulin sensitivity, and mitochondrial health without causing digestive issues. You don't need to cycle it. You don't need to ramp it aggressively. Consistency is what matters. One of the biggest mistakes people make with supplements is expecting an immediate feeling. Glycine doesn't work like caffeine or a pump product. You don't take it and suddenly feel wired. Instead, you notice changes indirectly. Recovery improves, sleep becomes deeper, joint discomfort decreases, training feels smoother, and over time, body composition starts to shift in a more favorable direction. This is exactly how foundational compounds are supposed to work. They don't force results, they remove resistance. When inflammation drops, insulin sensitivity improves. When insulin sensitivity improves, nutrients go where they should. Muscle gets fed, fat gets mobilized, energy becomes more stable. That's the cascade. Glycine also fits seamlessly into almost any nutrition strategy, whether you're doing intermittent fasting, low carb, higher carb, or calorie cycling. Glycine supports metabolic flexibility. It reduces the stress response associated with dieting and training, which is critical for preserving lean mass while losing fat. This aligns perfectly with the longevity principles discussed by Dr. David Sinclair: lower chronic stress, better mitochondrial efficiency, and improved cellular resilience. Another key benefit is sustainability. Most fat loss and muscle building plans fail not because they don't work, but because they can't be maintained. Chronic inflammation, poor sleep, joint pain, and hormonal stress eventually shut progress down. Glycine helps prevent that slow breakdown by supporting connective tissue, recovery systems, and nervous system balance. This is especially important as you get older. Muscle loss accelerates with age, inflammation rises, and recovery slows. Glycine helps counteract all three. It supports muscle preservation, reduces inflammatory noise, and improves sleep quality, 3 factors that strongly predict long-term health, strength, and metabolic function. Think of glycine as a force multiplier. It doesn't replace training, protein, or discipline. It makes them work better. Every rep becomes more productive. Every calorie gets used more efficiently. Every night of sleep becomes more restorative. If your goal is to shrink fat without losing muscle, build lean mass without wrecking your joints, and lower inflammation without shutting down adaptation, this is exactly the kind of compound that belongs in your routine.